afternoon. Hi everyone, how are you? My name is Rachel. Welcome to Wool and Spinning. I can be found pretty much everywhere as Wool and Spinning. I hope that this finds you extremely well. It is Tuesday, November 15th, 2022, and I'm coming to you from just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia, here in Canada. It is, we've got live chat going, everybody's saying hello and getting settled, but it's really good to see everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate that everybody takes the time out of their busy schedules to spend it with me. Thank you so much. I have a lot that I wanted to share with you today and a lot that I wanted to talk about. So we won't do too much preamble. Nora is home sick. So I'm hoping that there is no interruptions. I have set her up with a TV show and I'm hoping that she is able to sort of be okay and on her own and whatnot for the next hour, but we may have an interruption. She's not feeling great. She's not super sick, but she's sniffly and she's coughing a little bit, and it's just enough to not be able to send her to school. So yeah, she was home yesterday as well, and she has a optional open tutorial to go to tomorrow morning for school, but I don't think that I'm gonna let her go. So she's super bummed, and she missed soccer last night, which for anybody who knows Nora, that is a big deal. She lives and breathes for soccer. So she plays about 8 to 10 hours a week, and both with private coaching, and she's in two soccer clubs, 2 soccer leagues, and like it's all she wants to do. My husband and I were not in a lot of competitive sports as kids, so this is like a whole new world for us that we're trying to navigate and trying to support her, and we're both going like, is this really what you want to do? But it's all she wants to do. So it's amazing as you when you have kids in your life, whether they're your own or other people's kids, it's amazing to see as they get older, like their own personalities coming through and the things that make them tick come through. And of course, like part of that is allowing the space for that, right? And not sort of putting your own expectations and all of that kind of stuff on them. And this seems to be Nora's thing. So anyhow, it's a lot of driving around. It's a lot of waiting. Oh my goodness, Kelly, her kid went back to school today after 3 weeks of the latest round of sickness. This stuff just seems to get itself in and just embeds itself. That's very sweet, Charlotte. She says, look at Rachel's sweater, and Kelly says that sweater with a love emoji. This is Shifty. Is that right? Shifty by, or maybe it's The Shift. It's one of the shift patterns. Like there's Shifty, The Shift, The Night Shift by Andrew Mowry. So I wasn't very happy with this sweater. I was really bummed with some of the things and how it turned out, because I wasn't super keen on the blue, and I've never fixed it. I said that I would pull it out and that I would fix it, and I never ever did. Thank you, Kelly. It is the Shifty, and I just never have. So I'm like, you know what? If I'm not going to fix it, then I need to wear it. So I'm wearing it. So thank you, Amanda. She says, I agree, that sweater is the chef's kiss. Thank you so much, you guys. So in today's show, we have a very full show ahead of us. We have, let me see, I just want to fix something quickly before we go on, just so I can see the quality of the stream. We have quite a few things that I'm working on, like spinning wise, so I wanted to share those things with you. They are sitting right here. And then I had a new knit that I just cast on that I thought that I would share with you. And then I actually have a couple of finished items that I really didn't talk about a ton on the podcast. I talked about one of them, it's right there in the corner, but I didn't really talk about the other ones. So I thought that I would share those with you today. And then I have a couple of things that I finished that were weaving related. So if we get to that stuff today, then I will share it with you. And if we kind of run out of time and it just ends up being way too much content for one show, because I do need to be cognizant of the time because of Nora, and then we'll save it for another time, or I will try to get it recorded later this week, and we'll do it as a premiere next week in lieu of a live stream. So Yeah. Christine says, fortunately, my daughter was musical rather than sporty, so no standing on the sidelines in damp, wet, and cold weather for me. Yeah, it's my brother was musical. Well, I played piano and trumpet and stuff right up until grade 10, but my brother was both. He was sporty and musical. So my mom went to all the music and my dad went to all the sports. So, oh, thank you, Charlotte. So she says that the main part is the green in that shirt that goes with my eyes. Thank you so much. That's very kind. So let's start. I'm just going to start at the top of the list, and we'll run the intro credits. And when I get back, we'll start off, I think, with the spinning stuff, and then we'll go from there into the knitting with our hand spun, and then we'll finish up with the weaving stuff, because that stuff actually isn't with my hand spun. So we'll kind of go in order, and we'll start right after this. I was trying to figure out what buttons to push. I'm like seeing her going, which button is it again? What do I go to? All right, so this is the first thing that I have been working on. This has been on my wheel. It's actually been on my Majacraft Suzie, which is right here behind me, this wheel right here behind me. And this has been a really interesting spin because it's this fiber here, and I'm on the final bobbin, but what I do what I did was I took this braid. It's an Elfenwolle, it's banana, so it's Shetland banana and Tussah 60-20-20 blend. And the translation from German is at the old mill. That's the colorway name. And of course, if you guys have known me for any length of time, you will totally understand why I chose this colorway when I ordered from Tina. And unfortunately, Tina, it doesn't seem, people have done some investigation for me on the podcast in the past, and it looks like she's not dyeing anymore, which is really too bad. However, these are totally my colors, and my original plan, my original plan was to spin this as just sort of a 2-ply, strip it down the middle, spin each half to a bobbin, and that was kind of it. But after I had sort of looked at the fiber for a while, and I had spun one of her other braids that I had in my stash, and I've been really stashing down this year, which you guys know, and I've been just doing like braid after braid after braid, trying to spin through some of this stuff that's been sitting around for a long time. I decided to actually do it as a 3-ply, and I decided to do it as a fractal, and there were 3 reasons for that. The first one was that I really love round 3-plies. No matter what the fiber content is, I love 3-plies. The second reason was I love these colors, and whether these colors barber pull or twist on each other or create any kind of color mixing and color blending, there isn't anything in this braid where if we mix those colors by twisting them together, so by barber poling them, they're not going to really cause a lot of visual optical mixing that's going to cause a lot of like really muddy, icky colors. You know, the brown is still going to stay brown, the yellow is still going to stay yellow, the overall feel of the braid is going to sort of mute and become sort of overall gray brown, but like that's the main color in the braid, so I was fine with that. And then the third thing was I didn't really care one way or another if I had, you know, an unbelievable amount of really fine 2-ply that was a bajillion yards versus a 3-ply that was maybe a sport weight, 14, 16 wraps per inch, and was maybe a little bit less in yardage, but gave me sort of a round yarn that I could work with and use as like color work in a yoke kind of thing. I don't need a full skein of yarn for color work in a yoke, and so I can, you know, spin a braid like this and know that I'll have more than enough to do something like that. Does that make sense? And I was also really inspired by my most recent cast on, which I'll talk about later in the show. where it's just a really beautifully blended 3-ply of colors that I really love. And I sort of thought, you know, I love these colors. That blue that's in there, there's actually quite a bit less of the blue in the actual braid than it looks like when the fiber is still braided and the photo was taken. There's actually really only little hits of that blue, very, very short repeats where there's just a little bit of blue in the fiber. And so overall that blue is going to basically go to gray. When it combines with the white undyed fiber that's left in there, and then the darker taupey brown that's in there, that lighter blue, that gray blue is mostly going to disappear. And that's fine. That's totally okay. So what I ended up doing was I split the braid into 3 bundles of fiber instead. And the first strip was the first bobbin, and then the second batch of fiber I divided into, I think it was 4, but it might have been 5 strips of fiber. And then of course the final bobbin is stripped down into all these little bits of fiber for the final singles. And so it's ended up being a blended 3-ply, a blended fractal basically, which is fine. I'm excited about that. Now, the banana and the Tussah in this Shetland blend, even though the Shetland is just over 50%, my ply back test that I did when I was first sort of figuring out what I was going to do with this, it's really hard to see because unfortunately it was in that really light blue part. So this isn't going to be like a really clear, easy to see sample. But it has like no elasticity whatsoever. And I don't think that the yarn overall is going to have elasticity at all, particularly. Might have like, you know, 1% maybe elasticity. However, what it will have is drape. I can already see that this is going to have some really beautiful drape. This actually might end up being yarn that would be better suited for something in a woven project, and that would be fine too. So it might be really nice as weft for something. As a 3-ply, it could be warp, and then, you know, maybe a 2-ply or even maybe a singles for the weft. So there's lots of possibilities, but that's what I'm working on, and that's what is on my Majacraft. Yeah, the blue, Rebecca says, too bad the blue will go away. Yeah, it won't be particularly pronounced. It might gain a little bit of elasticity in the wash, to be honest with you though, that banana and that Tussah, when you feel the yarn, it feels very much like, you know, when we describe yarns as being like very planty and, you know, because they have like a lot of a high Ramie percentage in them, or they maybe have a lot of flax in them, or what's the other one that has been used in our community? Ramie is one that people have used to blend with wool, mostly so that they don't have such warm fibers. They're looking for other characteristics of other fibers to add in with the wool. Generally drape, sheen, something that's not quite as warm, maybe doesn't have a cooling effect, but it's maybe not quite as hot. And you'll get to that point where your percentages will be high enough that it'll feel not like wool. And I think because this is a 60-20-20, which is basically a 60-40 split, you're getting close to that 50% where the wool really starts to take a back seat and the other fibers come forward. So this yarn is really going to begin to feel a little bit less like wool and a little bit more dominant with the other fibers and the other characteristics. I actually think if this was 60-20, if it was 50-25-25, it would completely feel like the other fibers. It wouldn't feel like wool at all. So 60% Shetland and then 20% banana, 20% Tussah. It's just at the bottom of the screen right here under the number 1, Elfenwolle, Shetland banana and Tussah, and there are your percentages. So yeah, 60-20-20, it's right here on the screen. So yeah, super interesting. The second thing that I'm working on, and I actually got it started, wrong one, is my Westcoast Colour Toothy. So this is this fiber, and I actually started to get it spun. So this is the beginning of the first batch of fiber that I have. This is sort of, this is a sliver, and I have these two here from this first. You can see how Lynn does it right here. This is actually Lynn's yarns too. Obviously these are my hand spun yarns, but this is 100% Falkland. It's also Lynn's fiber, Westcoast Colour. I think it's westcoastcolour.org. Anyhow, she sort of collects her fiber. She weighs it all. It's sort of roughly 100 grams per thing. Anyways, I'm about a quarter of the way through spinning this first sort of batch, if you will. And this was the sampling that I did. We did this on the show in a recent and previous episode. And I've actually gotten started on spinning this. So we had done a carded diz sample. We had done a carded sample. I had spun just straight from the roving, as it was. These were some of the really fine 2-ply that I came off with. So what I ended up deciding to do was, in the interest of time and energy, I decided not to do a huge amount of fiber prep ahead of time, because one of the things that was happening with the fiber prep was I was ending up with a huge amount of waste. So there's nothing inherently wrong with this fiber. It's probably a large percentage Perendale. So it'll be strong, it'll be warm. If I leave lots of air in it, it'll be particularly warm. But it is slightly toothier. It's a little tiny bit more on the coarser end of wool. And my long-term goal with this is actually fabric for a coat, for a hand spun, hand woven coat, hand sewn. That's the goal. So to spin this stuff up, I don't need every inch of singles to be perfect. I don't need every inch of singles to be absolutely perfectly uniform and, I just don't. I don't need that type of precision in a project like this. I need yarn. That's what I need. And I need oodles of it. So I took this big thing, and I made a whole bunch of batches of fiber like this that were sort of like the thickness of my thumb, maybe a wee bit thicker. And then what I did is, as I've been getting to them, I've been dividing these into in half, and then pre-drafting this out and only moving down the length of fiber by about 1 inch. So it is time consuming to pre-draft. This one's been completely done, but just moving down at about 1 inch down the fiber at a time. And the reason for that is because there is some unbelievably short bits in here. Downy short bits that probably were some second cuts, some stuff that's a little bit neppy, a little bit coarse, a little bit rougher. And so if I move down the fiber just very, very slowly, I can really pre-draft that stuff out really, really nicely. And as I do that, it's creating this, pre-drafted, sort of pin-drafted roving kind of stuff where, yes, there's texture and bits and pieces in there. You can really see some there. That's going to add more texture to the yarn. There's just no other way of describing it. However, it makes for a much, much nicer spinning experience at the wheel. And it also means that with a issly pre-drafted fiber, like this was the original fiber from here, and look at how much I've pre-drafted it out, it makes for a very fast spinning experience because the fibers are sort of when you pre-draft, you sort of realign everything. And it also means that I can just sit down and start spinning, and it's smooth, and the fiber's already been sort of opened up. Air has already been added to it. Some of the really, really coarse areas of the fiber, like some of the stuff that's like really not nice, I've pulled out. So then when I come through it a second time to actually spin it and add twist, it's quite a bit improved from what it was when it was initially like this. So it's actually made the spinning process quite fast. So when the kids were sitting here on Thursday last week, I think it might have been Thursday or Wednesday, they were both really into what they were doing for schoolwork, and they both had Chromebook time because they both had digital work that they were working on. James was working in Microsoft Teams, Nora was working on Mathletics, and they had these specific assignments that they were working on. I sat here and I actually spun through the first quarter of all of this fiber on the rows really quickly because it was all pre-drafted out already. So it makes it just anything to sort of speed up your process a little bit, because we just need, sometimes we just need yarn and we have to make it quickly. So I'm gonna just take a pause and catch up. So Dion, she was wondering how I was prepping with so much waste. So the previous episode where I discuss all of that and I actually go through the sampling process of all of this is episode, it wasn't our last one, it wasn't Halloween. It was episode, I feel like it was 252. Yeah, 252. So that episode, I actually go through all of the sampling for this fiber, and that gave me the samples that are photographed here. So have a look at that episode and you'll see all of the sampling that I went through and how and what the different methods were that I used to sample. The one that gave me the most waste specifically was the one, I feel like it was the one that was carded and dizzed. Or was it the one that did I comb one of them? I'm trying to remember what I did. Oh my goodness, it's been so long. Oh, welcome Micah, good to see you. Carded and dizzed off, and then yeah, it was one of the ones that was carded and dizzed off. So yeah. And it was, there was quite a bit of waste left on the carder because of all these like really short bits, and I was dizzing off and the diz just couldn't catch them, if that makes sense. So yeah, all right, so that is that. The next thing that I've been working on is this isn't a great photo, but this is my new I might actually go to the big camera for this one, so just bear with me here for just a second. Sadie next door is home from school as well. They just walked by to walk the dogs, so she must be sick as well. So this is one of my new Mirkwood Spindle. It is one of his, what was it called again? Belinda's Ruin Rainbow. I feel like it was, yeah. Belinda's, is Belinda? It's hard to read his writing. Anyways, Mirkwood Spindles. Amazing. Can't say enough good things. I have his POC as well, and I love that spindle. Anyhow, I've been pulling this out and working on it just when I can, because I really want to always have a supported spindle project on my spindles at all times. And I've actually just finished making sure that all of my spindles from the Cormo are all kind of put away and organized and cleared off, and that I caught all of the Cormo singles from that big monster spin. And when this is full, then I'll grab another one and I'll fill that one up. And when that one's full, I'll grab another one and fill that one up. So this is sort of the inaugural spin on this spindle. And those are the crystals around it. It's just a really fun spindle. But I also wanted to share with you the fiber, because the fiber is just beautiful. So this is one of Katrina's one-of-a-kind Rolag sets that she did. So Katrina of craftyjacks.ca, Crafty Jacks Boutique. So this is what it looks like, the little Rolag here. And this is organic Polwarth. Organic Polwarth, 26% Sari silk, 15% mulberry silk. And it's a one-of-a-kind, and this is the set here. And I have bought this as my little spinning bowl. I had bought this set back at the beginning of the pandemic. And I also bought one that's more blue. It's not quite as yellow and red and everything. And I had originally planned to use the two of them together. So I would spin all of the singles of the one, spin all of the singles of the other, ply them together, and that would give me a substantial amount of yardage. That is still my plan. However, I just pulled this set of Rolags out just to kind of give me a place to start, because I found with the Cormo spin, It ended up being, I did calculate how much that one was. So let me just pull it up because I wrote it in my Ravelry notebook so I could tell you guys. The Cormo fleece ended up being a total of 0.6 pounds. So I had bought a pound of fiber originally, and then after washing and waste and all of that, and after it came out of the pin drafter down at Kingdom Fleece and Fiber Works, it ended up being 0.6 pounds total of fiber. And it still felt overwhelming to be doing on my support spindles. Like, it still felt like that was just an inordinate amount of fiber to spin up. I ended up, remember, with that spin, I ended up with almost 3,000 yards of yarn. If you're wondering about that spin, I talked about it in last episode. Was it last episode, you guys, or was it the one before? I'm forgetting because it's just been such a blur. Life right now feels like a blur. Yes, it was last episode, the Halloween one. In that one, I talked about the Cormo spin and the finished yarn and all of that kind of stuff, but it just felt like such a huge amount of yarn. And the goal was to spin that throughout the year, like that I would spin through that fiber over the course of the year. So this is a total of 100 grams. That's it. It's only 100 grams. It's totally doable. And so I thought, you know, let's just be really, really kind to myself and just spin one of these at a time and really enjoy the process. And so that's what I've been doing. I haven't been pre-drafting these particularly, although I have started, when there's a big chunk, I'm trying to find some, when there's a really, really big chunk of Sari silk, it does seem to need to be pre-drafted a little bit. So like there's a big chunk coming up here. So I've just been drawing out the Rolag, just very gently, keeping my fingers really, really light and just sort of teasing it apart and just giving it some space so that when I go to add the twist, I've got something that I can draw against and not end up sort of all caught up and not able to draft and everything's coming forward in big chunks and all that kind of stuff. So I haven't been pre-drafting the whole thing it's just too much to have this big stretch of fiber out behind me. But I have been teasing it out little by little so that when there's a clump of Sari silk, I can just sort of work through it more than anything and tease it apart. So for those who are just learning how to support spindle, I hope that that is helpful. And if anybody else has had some good sort of, you know, any tips or techniques that has really helped you spin up things like Sari silk that can be a little bit more challenging because they it doesn't necessarily draft really super smoothly like we're used to with wool. Just pop your tip in the live chat, whatever's worked really, really well for you. So that's been a fun project, and I've been taking it with me wherever I go, and then every so often I get, you know, a little bit of spinning done. It's really hard to support spindle standing at the soccer field. You really do have to be sitting. However, when the kids are at tutoring and I'm sitting and it's pouring rain and it's not super realistic to be going for a big walk, I have been working on it a little bit. Taziana, it's so good to see you, quote unquote, in the live chat. Thank you so much for being here. It's really, really good to see you. I saw you had posted some beautiful photos in the Slack channel the other day, and thank you so much for sharing. All right. What do we have next on the docket? What do you guys want to talk about next? I'm going to talk about some knitting in our hand spun. So I just cast on a new project the other day, and I don't know if you guys have kind of noticed. I think I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but I have really kind of run out of a lot of mojo for knitting sweaters, and I've continued to knit sweaters. And the funny thing is I've actually started wearing them more than I did previously. Like in past years, I would make a sweater, knit a sweater, and then it would just sit and I wouldn't wear it. And over the last probably like 4 months-ish, probably since like the summer when it was getting cooler in the evening and you just needed a little something, I've really started to reach for my sweaters. And I really hadn't done that up till that point. I'm not really sure why. There's no reason for it. but I've really started to wear them, and I've started to wear ones that I haven't previously worn, like that weren't ones that I was particularly happy with. They were ones that sort of that I finished, that got put aside, and that was kind of the end of it, like this one. So but I haven't felt really super inspired to cast anything on, and I haven't been knitting a ton. Part of that is because I don't necessarily want to knit a ton more sweaters. Like, I feel like I've got sweaters, I don't necessarily wear them, I don't really want to make any more. But when we were away at Canadian Thanksgiving and we had gone camping that weekend, Amy Christoffers put out her new pattern called Pressed Flowers. And the photo will cycle through because I included it in this batch of photos, so it will come up. But it's a mosaic knitting pattern. It's a cardigan. It's bottom up, so you start at the bottom and you work your way up. And it's a drop shoulder, which is not my go-to. I rarely knit drop shoulder cardigans. However, I saw it and I fell in love. And it's not unusual that I don't not fall in love with her stuff. Like, this is like quintessential. I just love Amy's stuff. And I was really drawn to it. Anyways, there was a coupon code. I bought it, and which I don't normally do. I sit on patterns for a long time. I wait a long time before I buy patterns. I don't tend to buy them on sale for two reasons. First, I don't want to purchase on a pattern on a sale just because I think I might knit it in the future and it might save me $1 or $2. I just, it's not worth it to fill my Ravelry library anymore with stuff that I may or may not knit for the sake of $1 here or there. The second reason is because I have been knitting for a really long time, and I know a lot. There are a number of knitwear designers that I am more than happy to support. I am more than happy to pay full price for their patterns and to pay them for their work. They pay tech editors, they pay photographers, they're self-publishing their patterns, they're running small businesses. I run a small business, I know what it's like. I want to support them at the full amount if I can. And so as long as what they're charging is not an absolutely exorbitant amount, I want to buy the pattern at full price. So, and that's my personal thing. That's not like for anybody else. So I saw this pattern, it had just been released, and I bought it right away, and I bought it with a discount. I was like doing everything I don't normally do. And the reason is because I knew that I really, really wanted to knit this pattern. So I pulled out, so you guys can totally laugh at me. So I pulled out my gauge swatch that I had made out of Disdaryl Ranch's Mocha. It's their alpaca Corriedale yarn. I think I have the right blend. I have two of their yarns in my stash. I have this one, and then I have a fully white one. And I'm pretty sure that this one is the alpaca Corriedale, but unfortunately their website is no longer active. So I don't actually know, like, I can't go on the website and look up the yarn and figure out what it was. I know I have a card for it somewhere, so if I'm incorrect, I will go back and fix everything so that you can find this yarn as well. But this was my gauge swatch, and it made a really beautiful fabric on 3.5 millimeter needles. If somebody could do the conversion for me, what's 3.5? US size 4 needles, which was a downsize from the pattern, which I wasn't surprised about. I often have to go down needle sizes when I knit Amy's patterns. And I think the pattern calls for US size 5, 3.75 millimeter needle. So I got gauge at 3.5 millimeter needles, and I pulled out, and you guys will recognize this yarn if you've been around for a while. This is the yarn that I knit and ripped and reknit and ripped and reknit woolen honey out of. And it just, no matter what I did, it would not work for me, and the fit wouldn't work, and I couldn't get gauge, etc., etc., etc. Wrong yarn, wrong needle size. I'll try again one day, because I still love that sweater. But this ended up being the perfect yarn for this sweater. So what I ended up doing was I raided my stash, and I was looking for a yarn. Have you guys ever done this? I was looking for a yarn that I had spun whenever, that I had always really wanted to knit with, and I never made it a priority to pull it out of my stash and find something to knit out of it. So I was looking for a hand spun yarn that had been stashed at whatever point that I had never knit with. This actually isn't super old hand spun. This is Hello Yarn. It is organic Polwarth as well. There's something in this show today about organic Polwarth. Like there's some joke that we could make, 'cause everything, I feel like everything is organic Polwarth. And I spun this in recently. I spun it in August. I started it in August and I finished it in November, exactly a year ago. Like it's not a long time ago. It's a 3-ply. It's very finely spun. It matches this 2-ply really beautifully in terms of gauge. And there are some areas in this yarn, this is a fractal 3-ply, where there's a lot of gray. And there is some barber pulling with the dark brown and the gorgeous rusty colors, but I do think that it's going to blend in with this yarn in those sections quite a lot. However, there are some sections in Amy's cardigan where that's the case as well. Right along her bust line there, you can barely see the flowers. And it's because the color difference, the value difference, it's all too closely matched. So I think it'll still work. And then I'll go to the big camera so that you guys can see where I've gotten to thus far. Unfortunately, I started from the wrong end of the ball. And I've started at the section where it was chain plied. So there is a part of me that's wondering if I should rip back and restart at the end of the ball that's not chain plied, because I've ended up with these shorter stripy bits in here where the flowers have like where you get these like streaks of color across, whereas if I started at the other end I would end up with a more homogeneous fabric. It's also at the bottom of the sweater, and if anybody is looking that closely at the bottom of my sweater, I feel like I've got bigger problems. That's just my instinct. So I'll hold this up a little bit closer so you can really see the flowers. This is all done with mosaic knitting. So it's all slipped stitches and purl bumps and purl ridges. Very subtle, very pretty. Like just really pretty, and the flowers are offset, so that's kind of where it is. This is the other end. I have to get the autofocus to work. It's not been working particularly well, and I need to get Mike to look at it, so sorry about that. Anyhow, that's the beginning. I suspect that this is one of those patterns. This pattern was like this. The further along you go and the more fabric you have, the more obvious the patterning becomes. Because even when you look at the photo of Amy and hers, I think when you look at it like a little small section of it, like this is just such a small section. You've got one full flower with a little piece of another one. It's really hard to see the overall pattern. But then when you have the entire piece in front of you, it's just so obvious that you've got this 1970s wallpaper in front of you. So I think this is one of those things where you need to see it bigger. This reminds me so much of your crackle weaving. Oh, that's so interesting. Yes. Yes, totally. It's like Scandinavian Favorite, which is on the loom right now. I wish I had a photo of that right here so that I could show you really quickly what Rebecca's referring to, because we won't have time today to talk about that project. But when you see it, you'll be like, oh yeah, of course, that looks like a Scandinavian Favorite. So this is what's on my loom right now. And this is why Rebecca says that it's like the crackle. It's because if you look, right here is one of those little like kind of cross flower things, and then there's the gray one over there. But yeah, it kind of looks like the same graphic. Sort of interesting. I hadn't made that connection, but that's totally what it reminds me of. So funny. Yeah, so because of the yarn striping and because of those short repeats of color from the chain plying, there is a part of me that's like, I'm only 1.5 repeats through. This took one 45-minute swimming lesson. We're not talking about a huge amount of time invested. there is a part of me that's thinking that I might rip back and start again. And it's only because the chain ply, I just don't love how it's working up, and I still have quite a bit of chain ply to go. If I didn't have a lot of chain ply to go, I would just punt. But the fact that I've still got quite a bit to go, I'm sort of waffling about maybe ripping back and starting again. It wouldn't be the end of the world. So that is that. Does anybody have any questions about this before? If I know you're right, Dorothy says if you're thinking about it, just do it. Absolutely, it's just a matter of like finding time. Yeah, totally. Yeah, Wendy says I have so many patterns in my library I bought on sale thinking I would knit, but now I'm pretty sure I never will. I don't mind too much though because I'm happy to support the designer. I totally agree, and I've got patterns in my library like that as well, and there's a few designers that like I never mind purchasing their patterns. But yeah, it's really interesting how you know, we kind of get caught up in these sales sometimes, and then you end up with this library full of stuff. So yeah, very interesting. Sam says, now that I've lost weight, I can raid your wardrobe. Totally, Sam. Congratulations on losing some weight, by the way, too. That is not an easy feat. Anybody who has ever tried. Yeah, Dana says, yes, I would rip back. I agree, you guys. Yeah. This is one of those rare patterns where you really want striping in your contrast color. Yes and no. You want striping, but you don't want your repeats of your stripes to be too short. So one of the things is if I just simplify the stream here for just a sec and take out some of these other photos to show, I wanted to show you guys the yarn. If we go to this, if you look at her sweater, part of the reason why it works is because it's long, slow transitions of color. I am sure that you guys in chat can absolutely guess what this yarn is and what the contrast yarn is. I'm going to leave that with you guys. You guys can say what it is because I know that everybody knows what it is. It has long, slow transitions of color. So the thing is that you're not talking about short bursts of variegated yarn. So if you use short bursts of variegated yarn, you need something that is related enough that when you look at the graphic of the flower, that it looks like a flower. If it's, in this case with mine, you have the gray, this is a really good example, this one here actually. You have the gray at the bottom here that matches too closely with the yarn, with the main color. So the contrast color here at the bottom of the flower is too close. And then you have this kind of orange bit, but then it transitioned into the dark gray. And so it looks, what this flower here looks like is that it's only the top part of the flower. You can't see that there's a whole other piece down here that's related. And so what you need is long, slow transitions of color, which is why I should have started at the other end of the ball that wasn't chain plied. Because the chain ply, the stripes are too short. So they might, you know, go over the course of the entire row, but you need that, but what you actually need is that color to travel over several rows so that it's transitioning over the course of the entire flower and you can see the entire shape. Whereas with the chain plied part, it's only that dark, especially the dark gray, is only traveling for a certain amount, like for one row, and then you're back to the orange again. And what I need is a longer, slower transition of color. Does that make sense? So yes, you want striping. No, you don't want it to be too fast. And the yarns that would work if they were chain plied, or if you had a more variegated yarn where that transition happened, was more of an analogous colorway. So one that sort of transitioned between pinks and blues, like this, relatively quickly. This would work really, really well. All of your flowers would be, you know, blue, green, and turquoise, but that would be beautiful. And it would be very clear what each shape was, that they were those little flowers floating along the sweater. So you sort of have to find that happy balance between those two things, and how the eye travels. Does that make sense? Yeah, exactly, Dorothy. Analogous colors. Yeah. Good night, Becca. Yes, it's late where you are. It's almost 10 o'clock. So, I had thought about that, Sam, the chain plied for the sleeves. What I'm hoping is that I don't need it. And that I can knit up the rest of the sweater. There's an unbelievable amount of yardage here. So what I'm hoping is that I actually don't need the chain ply at all. That's actually why I was going to hide it on the bottom hem, was nobody's really looking down there anyways, was I could hide it on the bottom hem, and then I could use the 3-ply fractal for the rest of it. But the thing is I'm going through such a little amount of yarn that like I just don't think I need it. So yeah. All right, let's move on. We've got lots to talk about. So Jacob, the Jacob breed and color study was a really fun study. We did it a while ago. It was in, I had it up here and then I lost it. We did the Jacob breed and color study back in 2021. It was the carded study for the year. So this was the one that ran from July through to the end of December of 2021. And then we went into the Radnor study at the beginning of 2022. It all feels like kind of a blur, hey? Have you guys found that the last 3 years? It's like just a blur of like, was that 2020? Was that 2021? Probably because we were all home. Anyhow, Katrina organized this study for us based on sort of, it ended up being a wee bit of a little bit rainbowy, but it was sort of around the idea of like creating color to evoke joy. So she was hoping that with these 5 colors that are at the top of her photo here, this is her photo, along with the natural shades of the Jacob, that we could create sort of yarns and colors that sort of evoked a sense of joy. We were coming out of a really challenging time in our modern history, and you know, she was wanting to sort of have somebody open the package and just feel joy that they had this beautiful material to work with, kind of thing. And what I ended up doing was I took each of those and I put them on my blending board, and I made 3 colorways, 1 gray, 1 white, and 1 black. And then I had at each end of those Rolags the color. And the yarns that I created sort of speak for themselves. They transitioned from the natural color through the rainbow, through the natural color, through the rainbow, and each of them did it 3 times because there's 3 Rolags per colorway. And I plied them as a 2-ply with just a solid natural color. So the black went with the natural black, the white went with white, and the gray went with a gray singles. And what ended up happening was the gray was muted, just like we would expect. It muted down the colors, and it just sort of took the intensity out of the colors. The white became very light and very bright, and next to the gray, it looked a little bit, almost kind of a little bit washed out. I really liked the white one. Oh, and I added sparkle just for fun. I was like, we're creating joy. Let's add sparkle to all 3 of them. And then the black one, the colors became much more intense, much more moody, and saturated looking. And of course, those were the three yarns together. So that is what I did with the 3 yarns. Now, these 3 skeins were very, very small. They were each only about 30 grams, and I stashed them and I kind of just left them. And I was sort of hoping that at some point something would come up that I would want to work, make a pattern, you know, make something out of, use them together in combination. But Kristen from our queries group had posted on the Slack channel that she was working on these little neck scarves, and they're really super popular. They've kind of made a bit of a comeback, and I just love them. I think they are fantastic. They're super easy to knit. My friend Diana Twist has made a whole bunch of them, and slowly what I've been doing while I've been at work is working through the 3 balls of yarn and knitting up these little scarves. So this is the gray one, and you can see how muted and dulled the colors look, but you can still see the color. It's not like it's not there. This is the white one. It's probably my favorite. It's the lightest and brightest. It really does kind of evoke that feeling of joy. And I really, really like this one. And then the black one is very intense. It's dark, it's intense, the colors are intense. It ended up being the worst in terms of yardage, so it's not quite as long as the other ones. But what I did was I weighed each skein, and when I got to the halfway mark of the ball, I weighed them when they got to about 17 grams. I started to do the decreases. So you start at the one end, you cast on however many stitches, you increase, and then you start to decrease. So the scarves have sort of an elongated triangle sort of look to them when you lay them out, but it actually means around your neck, they're really, really nice. So this is the Sophie scarf. It's right here down below, number 5 on your screen, by Petite Knits. And I really like her patterns. They're quite lovely. Oh, that's such an, yeah, interesting, Rebecca. She says the white one is like those jewel Christmas colors that you see sometimes. That's so, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's kind of that like modern Christmas. Your hair is long. Yes, that's actually why I have it pulled up. I don't know if you guys have noticed over the years. I don't expect you guys to notice this. So, but when my hair gets to a certain point, when it gets to a certain length, I start to pull it up in buns, and I wear it up all the time. And it's just because it gets so, it's just way too long, but I'm not quite at the point where I can cut it yet, because I'm not quite long enough that I can donate it. So I have to like just put up with it. So you'll notice that my hair will be up now for a number of months, and then it'll be down again because I have cut it. It's this cycle, this 3-year cycle that I go through. Donate, grow, 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 hair gets tied up, cut, donate, and then I start again. Elizabeth says, I just came across my Jacob yarn that I spun for the color study a few days ago when I was looking for something else, and I want to knit a hat out of my yarn. I can't wait to see it, Elizabeth. Another option would be to change yarns for each flower set. I actually thought about that, Christine, because you actually really do knit each yarn, each flower in your sweater as you go across, or as you work your way up. You work one whole flower before you start the next one. So you could absolutely do that, and one whole flower like row could be like, you know, you could actually do a gradient, which would be really cool. You could spin all the yarn, and then you could have like your gradient yarns all the way up, because yeah, you work one entire flower before you start the next one, and you've got a break row that's in the main color in between. So if you look at the pattern here, you've got the entire flower row worked all the way across. You have a couple of break rows, and then you start the next flower motif. So you could do so much with this pattern in terms of color. If you have stuff in your stash, like you could even alternate, you know, if you've got 2 different skeins from 2 different spins, you could have, you know, one skein for one flower, work your break rows, the next skein, work your break rows, the next skein. Like there's so much you could do with this, so much. But the nice thing is, because you could do a really super scrappy sweater, good point, Rebecca, scrappy sweater, you could really use up a lot of yarn. So because you could knit through all those, you know, sample skeins, baby skeins, all that stuff. You could do this in natural colors. You could do light gray or white. Well, you could do anything for the main color, but I was just thinking off the top of my head, you could do a white or a light gray, and then have natural colors. You know, Muret, black, you know, I don't know, dark gray, brown, in all the natural colors, working your way through all the flowers. That would be really pretty too. There are so many options, it's just not even funny. All right, I think that's it for the knitting with handspun and the handspun part of the show. But I did want to talk about my cabin blanket. So the cabin blanket, I just came off the loom. This is a bit of a story, and I won't go on and wax poetic for too long, but basically I started this project when James was when James was in utero. I was pregnant with him. We didn't know what our gender of baby was going to be, and I bought all of this Barocco vintage yarn to knit this blanket, and this originally was the Hexy Love blanket crochet pattern, and she kind of just gives you the directions for the hexagons themselves, and then says sew them all together, make it however big you want, doesn't matter about gauge, figure out your needle size, your hook size, and like go, you know, you're off to the races kind of thing. It doesn't give you a lot of direction in the pattern other than how to make these hexagons. So I kind of went, I kind of got started, and then I needed to buy more yarn, and because I'd run out, and then I needed to buy more yarn, and then I had to buy more yarn. And in total, I think I punted around like the 11th skein mark. I think I had gotten to the point where I had 2 of each color, the cracked pepper, the sunshine, the aqua, and the grapefruit. I had 2 skeins of each of those. So that was 8 skeins. And then the mushroom color was the remaining 3. And so I had 11 skeins sort of invested in this project by then. And I just couldn't see any end in sight because I was only about halfway through the blanket. So I do somewhere have a photo of where I got to. The blanket actually did get quite significant, but like I still probably needed another 11 skeins of yarn kind of thing. And by then, up here in Canada, Barocco Vintage, maybe somebody can help me out. I'm pretty sure it's $11 a skein, or at least it was when I was purchasing it back then. Now I'm kind of curious how much it costs. Valley Yarn, I'll look up just on Valley Yarn. Barocco, I'm really curious now. I'm going to look it up because I want to know. So just regular Barocco Vintage is $11.50 Canadian. So in US dollars today, that is, where's the conversion? In US dollars today, it is $8.65 US today, right now. I just looked it up. Exchange rates. So if you were dealing with the Bank of Canada today, you would pay $8.65 per skein. So 11 skeins, that's only $90. I'm rounding up, or I'm sort of rounding. It's only $90, but then I was looking at having to purchase like another 11 skeins. So now we're at like almost $200 after tax American for this blanket. And by then James was born. He was almost 1. I was just like totally had lost all interest in this project. What really put me off was because of the superwash nature of Barocco Vintage, because it's machine wash in cold water. It's a 52% acrylic, 40% wool, and 8% nylon. It's not a bad yarn. It's not my favorite, but it's not a bad yarn. It was starting to unravel. So as I was working on it, I remember talking about this on the podcast, the centers, even though I had secured the center and woven in all my ends and, done all that stuff, it was all like, it was starting to like come undone. Like it was slowly, stuff was working its way out. And I was sort of like this is a really good example here, where I was gonna have to like reweave in the ends. And the thing is like the kids hadn't even used the blanket yet, and it was sort of coming unraveled. And I was sort of like, oh shoot. And that really took the wind out of my sails, and I put it aside. So it's been sitting in a bag for the last 9 years, because James is 10 and a half. And I decided, I'm gonna go to the big camera so that you guys can really see this. I decided that I really wanted to make something where I could learn a new weaving technique and just weave it all off. Like unravel the blanket, weave it all off, and just get it used up kind of thing. So this is a pattern that's coming out. It will be out relatively soon. It's in tech editing right now. And it's called the Cabin Blanket it's by Felicia. It'll be available on the School of Sweet Georgia. I didn't follow it to a T because my set was a little bit different. So I can't remember exactly what the set is in the pattern, but my set was 10 ends per inch, 10 picks per inch. And I did all of the colors all the way across. And I wanted to learn, this is sort of my first official double weave project. So, what I did was I had the 5 colors, the mushroom, I'll try and explain this sort of as sort of straightforward as I can. I had mushroom, aqua, sunshine, grapefruit, and cracked pepper. So I had the 5 colors, And I knew that they would be the top of the blanket, and then I would just repeat that sequence again for the second layer of the blanket to make the double weave on the loom. When you think about double weave on the loom, you have your upper layer, and then you literally go around a corner, and then you have your bottom layer. So you're weaving your top layer, and then you lift your top layer out of the way, and you're weaving your bottom layer, and then you drop that back down, and then you're back to weaving your top layer again. So double weave, you're literally going around and up, and then back and down and up. So as long as you have 4 shafts, you can weave a double weave blanket that's in plain weave. So I started to unravel. I made my warp, which was very difficult because I was dealing with little bits and pieces of yarn, but I did it. I made a warp that was long enough for 2 blankets because I calculated my yardage and I had more than enough for 2 blankets. Not more to make even more blankets, but enough to make 2 blankets. And actually in the end, the loom waste was quite minimal. And I've ended up with the equivalent of about a skein and a half of mushroom left, and whatever's in this. This is sort of what's left. So yes, thank you, Amanda. I figured you would jump in. The course is coming soon in the School of Sweet Georgia, but the blanket pattern PDF is actually now available so people can see what yarn is required. So thank you so much, Amanda. I thought that maybe that was the case. I'll link to it in the show notes. I'll update them after the show so that you guys can see them. So these are washed and finished, but they are not pressed. I used 20-pound fishing wire at the one end for where you turn your corner so that you don't get too much drawn. And I did spread the last ½ inch or so of the warp on the top and the bottom. I spread it out a little bit just because I found with the first blanket, my join was a little bit too tight. It just kind of created like, it was just a little bit too tight. Part of that was because I was constantly having to put new yarn in because I would only weave a few picks before I had to start a new bit of yarn because I was unraveling yarn. So these are not the prettiest blankets. I'm just going to go ahead and say that right off the bat. However, I am really, really happy with them. So this one, this needs to be trimmed still. It needs to be cut down so you can see that it's a little bit longer. But this is how they came out. So it goes from the mushroom all the way down to the cracked pepper, and then all the way back down again, mushroom to the cracked pepper. And they actually ended up being a fair size. They are 40 inches wide by 50 inches long. And actually one of the things I was really, really happy on the second blanket with my salvages. I was really, really happy because with the superwash nature of this yarn, it was so stretchy and elastic. I actually talked to Amanda and Felicia about it because it was just like giving me no end of grief. My seam down the middle is far from perfect, but for my first attempt in my first blanket, I wasn't unhappy with it. There are a few things that I would do differently, and I did join some of my yarns in the center here because I had to, because I just didn't have enough yardage. I had to maximize. So this is the second one, and this is the first one. So the first one isn't as nice. It's a little bit more uneven. The center isn't quite as nice. I learned a lot on this one. This one had a lot of skips and a lot of areas where the shuttle had gone under stuff and my tension wasn't tight enough and all sorts of things. So this one just isn't quite as pretty. But to the untrained eye, to somebody just glancing at it, they would never notice. And like, honestly, the kids are not going to care. They are going to cuddle under these regardless. The other thing that I did with these is, for the fringe, I did about 4 inches. So this is all trimmed up and I just have to, do the other one. The other thing about these that I was going to mention, I machine washed them to finish them. So both of them were put in a medium, so 30 Celsius, wash water with very gentle soap on a express gentle wash, and then tumbled to dry. And I also set them quite tightly. So originally I had thought that I would weave them at 8 ends per inch, and then I adjusted all my numbers to weave them at 10 ends so that the fabric that I had on the loom was the fabric that I would end up with. So a little bit denser and a little bit, a little tiny bit, yeah, just denser, because of the superwash nature of this yarn and the acrylic nature. And like I needed a fabric that was a little bit closer set. So that is them. Worked out really well. I see I've got a couple of questions in the chat, so I will answer those now. I'm just going to move these off to the side because they're both in the way. All right, so let me just move those out of the way. There was a couple of questions. Don't be so hard on yourself. You could, after all, have gotten fed up with the crocheting and put the yarn in the bin. So Christine, that's such a good point. There was a time when I actually said to Weaving Group, which meets on Fridays through the Slack channel. It's under #weaving. So if anybody's interested in joining a weaving group, check out the Slack channel through Patreon, patreon.com/woolenspinning. And the weaving group meets every second Friday, and Lisa very, very kindly hosts it. It's kind of a grassroots group that started up. I actually asked them what they thought I should do because there were so many ends and like you're just constantly changing bobbins. And having to wind bobbins because like, you know, I've pulled out this crocheted blanket, right? Where is it? Where did it go? And I had all these little bits and pieces of yarn from pulling out like all of these, right? So this pink, the grapefruit, that was like, you know, that would take me, I think it was like 3.5 picks. So then I had to rip out another one, and that would take me another 3.5 picks, and then another one, and that would take me another 3.5 picks. So the number of ends in these things is unbelievable. Long-term wear is going to be very, so I said to them, I'm like, how, like, I feel like I should just cut these off. Like, I'm just going to punt, cut them off, doesn't matter. And everybody was like, absolutely, super supportive. And then I got really stubborn. I'm actually quite disagreeable, and Amanda and I were talking about this morning, and I kind of dug my heels in and I was like, I just want to see if I can do it. And so I started really ripping this out. Nora sat next to me and she actually really helped me to like really get going with ripping this out. And I really got going, and they actually ended up being really fast to weave, and I stuck to it, but I was going to cut them off. Like, life is too short. How wide was your blanket on the loom? So that's a great question, Dorothy. So the finished width of the blanket is 40 inches wide, and on the loom it was 20 inches wide because it was double weave. So I actually I would have had to take out a few ends of every single color, but I could have done this. No, I wouldn't have had to because my spring is 36 inches wide. I could have done it on my spring. I did it on my 8-shaft jack loom, which is a 45-inch wide loom. And that was more than big enough. Yeah. Dorothy said, I'm confused what you seamed in the center. Yeah, thank you, Kelly. I didn't seam it. It was it was woven double width. So it was the fold that I was mentioning. Sorry. Yeah, the fold where the double width fabric, there's places in that center part it's just not as pretty as it could have been, because it's my first time. So it's just figuring out like how tight to pull the yarn and how to, you know, sort of deal with that. It's not a selvage, but with that corner, if you will, on the loom, if that makes sense. I decided, so great question, Dana. She's wondering if I hem stitch. So there are ways to hem stitch double weave. You can hem stitch the top, and then when you get the work off the loom, you can finish hem stitching the bottom. But the problem is you really can't get to the bottom layer of the fabric to hem stitch the whole thing. So I actually asked Felicia what she did, and I did the same thing. So what she did was she took chunks of the blanket and she just knotted them, and that's actually what I did. And I didn't take it off the loom until, like, I actually sat at the loom and cut it off bit by bit and knotted them as I went. And that worked really, really well because nothing came unwoven. It was tightly knotted, and then when it went into the wash, the knots just tightened up even more. So I actually, as I was cutting it off the loom, I knotted it, and I did 4, because I had 40 ends per color for 10 ends per inch, 4 inches per color on the loom. I ended up with 4 ends in every single tassel. So there was 8 tassels per, 10 tassels per color. Does that make sense? Yeah, right, Dana? As soon as it's like, oh, no, wait, it was double width, you can't hem stitch, of course. Like, of course you can't. You know, it's just I did the exact same thing the first time. Thank you so much, Dorothy. She says you did great. Minimizing draw in on that folded cloth. Folded edge is tricky. It is. And like, I've been working on my double weave samples for my OHS for my unit 11, I think it is. And I've been sort of looking forward to starting to plan my double weave samples for my GCW. And I think that's really what they're looking at, is like, what are you doing with that folded edge? How are you weaving that? Another alternative would be to use waste yarn to protect the edge, then remove the waste yarn a little chunk at a time so you don't have to do it at the loom. That's a really good point, actually, Amanda. Yeah. And then remove the waste yarn. So that's for doing the fringe, for knotting the fringe. You could use waste yarn and then just remove it a little bit at a time and tie it as you go. Knotting makes it look like a heritage blanket. Totally, Christine. I thought the same thing. And I thought, you know, for the kids, like, I'm not going to sit there and fringe twist. I just fringe twisted. I know Amanda's been doing it too. I just fringe twisted for hours for my overshot scarf, which is coming up in content for December. You guys will see my finished overshot scarf from the Radnor breeding color study, and like just fringe twisting until the cows come home. Like, it's just so intense. So lots to think about, lots to work on. So we had a very, very full show today. I do have community participation to share with you, but I think we'll save it for next show. If we get a Welford Weaves episode out next week, I think I might actually tack it on to that. And I think we'll call it here. I am losing my voice. I can feel it, which always happens when I talk too much. I've also been working on my Stash Crackle Pop towels and my Have Drawl towels. I've really been making some big pushes into getting the yardage on both of those woven off. I want some of them for Christmas gifts. I would like to get them just off the loom in general. So I'm hoping that I'll have those to share with you in a Welford Weaves episode coming up in the next, either next week or the week after. And I will see you guys because November, the first live stream was so early in the month, like it was right at the beginning of the month. We don't have another live stream now until December 6th. So we've got a few weeks off. And in that time, I'm hoping to get at least one Welford Weaves episode out to you. So hopefully there will be some more stuff up and coming. Please watch the YouTube channel for announcements and whatnot. I'll make sure that I keep those coming for you. And I have been doing a lot. Thanks, Amanda. Yes, I have. Yeah, I was wondering how many you had, Amanda. She says I have 4 more scarves to do the twisted fringes. It's a lot. That's a lot of fringe twisting on those overshot scarves because they're like 20 inches wide and it's 18 ends per inch. So like, it's a lot of fringe twisting. So be gentle on your fingers. So this time next week, same time, same place, I'm hoping that we'll have a Welford Weaves episode for you guys to check out. That will be a premiere episode, so there will be chat. And please have a look at patreon.com/WnS for more content for things that we're working on as a community, for all of the teaching content for the month. It's all been published and released, so you guys can see what we've been working on. If you are confused about anything and you're not able to find anything, it takes 2 seconds to just reach out to me. Hey, Rach, I'm looking for blah, 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 blah. I am absolutely more than able to help you. So please don't hesitate to do that. Coming up on Monday, the 21st, we've got the Wool Circle coming up. That's the other live stream that happens in the community. Rebecca is going to be talking about sampling really super precious fiber to her. So what happens when you've got a fiber that's really, really, really precious to you and you're just not quite sure where to start, or your initial sampling is not exactly what you thought, but this fiber means so much to you. What are you going to do? So Rebecca is talking about that on the live stream coming up on Monday. And if you would like to learn more, please check out Woolen Spinning on Patreon. So patreon.com/woolenspinning/join. And you're looking for the Wool Circle tier, and that will give you access to all of those live streams and all of the old ones. We're up to episode 80. There is so much content now for the Wool Circle. Lots and lots of live streams and sampling and stuff to look through. So there's just so much there. I hope that covers everything. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Turn on that notification button, and I will see you guys back here next week. Same time, same place. Same time, same place. Not please. Same time, same place. Have a wonderful rest of your week. I hope that it's full of lots of really good making and that you're really excited about what you're doing. And I will talk to you next time. Bye, everyone.